the slide?
Looks great.
Yes, sir.
Is it up on the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I've been involved with the HSS, the White Speleological Survey, since the days that Bill Holliday formed it back in the early 90s, I guess it was. But I've been going to Hawaii on annual trips since the mid 80s. And I've gone every year until last year because of COVID. Had to cancel the trip and missed out going back to Hawaii in 19, but hopefully can return later sometime this year. So this is just a kind of a highlight recap of some of the work that I've done. Most of the caving these days, and has been, is on the Big Island of Hawaii. The early work that I did was in the Casimira cave system, which is off on the wet side, on the eastern side of the island, which is pretty much rains almost every day down there. Where John Wilson is, he sits right over the Hana cave system way down near the south end of the island, which is, again, one of the longest caves or lava caves in the world. So this is where that cave is down on the south end of the island. I believe it's the third longest lava tube in the world. Very mazy. Most lava tubes are singly passage like Casimira, but this one's a real mazy one. Peter Bostad, who lives down in the same area. So this is just some passage shots in the Hana system. You can definitely get lost in this one because it is so mazy. And the caves down there are a lot older, so they've had time to have gypsum crystals growing on the walls and floor. Here's a big sheet of it. Sometimes it gets so big they actually fall off the walls and ceiling, and there's one Peter picking up off the floor of some gypsum crystals. And roots find their way down. Most lava tubes are pretty close to the surface. What happens is the lava flows and cools and then it crusts over, where the tube can, still be flowing for years afterwards until it drains out. And you get splatters when the lava is flowing. They will splatter on the ceilings and the walls. Here's some red splatters. I think Peter and Ann live just in the subdivision just east of where John Wilson lives. And here was the map I created for the cave owner that runs wild caves and has a part of it lit up for taking tourists in. And this was actually one of the maps that I did get a medal for. Another one, again, quite mazy. And there's also delicate. You think of lava tubes as just being black, jet black, and no features, but if they've been around on this planet long enough, they're still young geologically. You can get a network of, here's a bunch of crystals growing on tree roots, calcite crystals. But Hawaii, believe it or not, can get snow. And we're looking up towards Mauna Kea. Technically, you could say it's the tallest mountain in the world if you cover it from the base of the ocean going up in the middle of the Pacific, and almost reaches up to 14,000 feet. I think it's about 13.8, I think, in height. So they don't get a lot of snow, but they do get some snow in winter. I know some skiers, if they get a chance to try to ski, they call it pineapple powder when they try to hit the slopes. Here we are on Mauna Loa looking back over to Mauna Kea. We're on a 1935 lava flow. So talk about young. This thing is not even 100 years old, but there's some good caves to be done on this flow, hiking down. And in this section, the lava is so thin in some places, your boot would even break through on some of it. But we had reports that the Army did training. There's the training Army base down on the saddle of the Big Island. And you're looking towards the saddle on the Big Island in this shot. And we're above the Army base. And I guess back in the 30s, when this thing was flowing, they actually tried to bomb the lava to try to stop it because it was heading towards Hilo. And here's what most of the lava tubes are formed. There's two types of rock in lava. This is the Pahoi Hoi, which is a ropey looking lava. And that's what really generates and forms these caves. The other one is called and it's mainly just kind of breakdown kind of looking rock. Here we are looking at what we call bomb cave, because we found a bomb that the Army used back in 1935 to try to slow this lava down. Luckily, it was just a shell. And that's Vi and Ted from New Mexico. And some of you may know the person on right, that's Dave Bunnell, who is our NSS news editor. And the caves up here, they've had a chance. This is high elevation. We're probably about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. So the gypsum is starting to form on the walls and on the floor. Almost looks like snow against the black rock. Another passage shot, a wall. The ceilings of small little lava stalactites, which is pretty common. You don't get the big stuff. Some caves you do, but this cave only had small stuff. And of course, there's crawlways like you would in limestone caves. Ted Lappin going through a little crawlway. But here's just a kaleidoscope of different colors on the walls of this lava tube called bomb. And checking out leads, that is Doug Medville. Some of you might know him. He's been around the NSS a long time and being belayed down to another lava tube. This was one we had to, we rigged up a cable ladder to go down, a 30-foot cable ladder. Lava is very rough on ropes. It's very jagged, so you really got to pad the lips and so forth. And anyway, we called this one Blade Cave. And here's a backlit showing one of the blades hanging down. And some of them were curved. We had never seen this before in a lava tube ever up here high on Mauna Loa. Again, these things are probably about 3 feet long, just like a sword almost blade. And that's looking back up out of the entrance. A little further down on that flow, we found another cave called Terraced Cave. And it got its name because it had all these terraces on the side, just kind of like curb lining when the lava is flowing and forming. Again, this cave is not even 100 years old. Here's what was a former lava pool that kind of cooled and drained out. And there's Dave Bunnell against some brown lava formations. And the previous few shots or so were actually Dave's great photography. As you know, he's one of the world-class leading photographers in caves. And there's the results of our little map. Terrace was in the 1843 flow, the next flow over from the 1935 flow. It's always helpful to have a Jeep because you get off the road. Of course, you never tell the rental company you're going to be taking it off the road because driving on these roads can be rough. This is over on the dry side, north of Kona. And off the Wakaloa Road is we mapped several miles on 5-6 different caves. We're mapping one by that cinder cone kind of in the center middle. We call Dust Cave. There's Doug and we headed down the passage, quite large, but it's one of the few caves where you can actually get pretty dusty, dirty, and muddy towards the bottom. Pretty spacious. I believe it mapped out close to 2 miles, but nice walking passage. Again, typical lava tube where you only have one passage. They'd even have these gypsum beards growing on the side of the wall. And this thing's probably 3 or 4 feet across. and a few lava mites. You don't get very tall stalagmites in the lava tubes. However, I've seen some big ones, but this is pretty typical. Maybe only a foot or two high. And towards the bottom, it was just became a mud pit. And there we are. I mean, pretty rare to get this dirty and muddy in a lava tube in Hawaii. And then just hiking across the fountain grass, which is a real issue. It was an invasive grass that is spreading all over the island, at least on the dry side, and can cause brush fires. And of course, since you're surrounded by water, Peter and I went out a few years ago and heard reports of a large sea cave. And after kayaking a couple miles, we found the sea cave, but the water was a little rough. We didn't really have proper gear, so we came back. I came back in the fall, about 3 or 4 months later, and Peter had since found a way to climb down the cliff to get the Pirates Cave is out on that point, and it's actually a dive site called Rob's Reef. And here we are mapping, I mean, waiting for the waves to kind of not sweep us off the edge of the shelf there. Looking out at the entrance. We brought inner tubes since we had to swim over to that point, and it helps when you're mapping to have something to kind of rest on. And it was named Pirates Cave because we discovered a pirate's flag in the back of it. And an inner chamber beyond the sump, got pretty big passage, and you finally can get out of the water. There's Ann Bosted standing on the rock that you can see light filtering in, but during high tide that sumps out, and you actually climb kind of the breakdown off to the left. You can see the breakdown rocks coming in that can still give you access to the cave when it's at high tide. And there's the finished map for Pirates Cave that I completed just about 2 years ago on this one. Well, we'll move on. This is just going to be kind of a collection of just highlights of the different islands in Hawaii. Most people will fly into Honolulu. I shot this out of the window of the plane coming into Honolulu. That's Diamond Head and Waikiki Beach. The island to the northwest, the oldest of the main islands, is Kauai, called the Garden Island. And this is a shot from the top of the Nepali cliffs, looking down to the Kalalau Valley. It was one of my very first trips to Hawaii was to map the giant sea caves on the Nepali coast back in the late 80s with Dave Bunnell and Carol Vesley and a couple other cavers. And you can see the cliffs, how they come down. They're 4,000 feet high from the top, just come almost straight down. And there's occasionally beaches where the streams come in, and of course, sea caves. And that's what we were there. Dave had done his research saying it's calm seas on the North Shore during the summer months. So we went there in August to hit it. And back then it was pretty easy. We were just pretty much young out of college, just starting our working career, but we didn't want to rent this stuff, too expensive. So Dave had a little Zodiac with a Yamaha engine and put that in 2 big duffel bags, believe it or not. And I had an inflatable that I invested with, Bill Lieben was on that trip. And so we got all this equipment onto the plane, believe it or not. You can never do anything like that nowadays, but back in the 80s, we could. And we spent a week on this beach here, Kalalau Beach, about 6 miles paddle down. And it was really like paradise back then, mapping these giant sea caves. And there was our camp. You can see the Zodiac on the beach and the inflatable there. And we mapped about a dozen caves. Biggest ones were maybe a little over 1,000 feet. Sea caves aren't known to be real big. This is just around the corner from our camp called Hanapu Arch that we mapped. And this actually appeared in the opening scene of a King Kong movie, I was told. One of the coolest caves there was the Sacred Water Cave, had this skylight and you can actually swim, kayak, or even nowadays they have commercial Zodiac tours, and they'll take you way back to the back of the cave, and you go around the corner and you come out another entrance. So you can actually do a through trip in this one. We had a couple other cavers show up, and they ended up taking the kayak back. So it gave Dave and I a chance. There's a young Dave Bonnell, about 35 years ago, to hike out the 11 miles. The Kalalau Trail is one of these world-class hikes. And nowadays I hear you got to get permits, and it's hard to get permits to even camp there on that beach nowadays. And there's the Grand Canyon of the Pacific, Waimea Canyon, which is near the Nepali coast. Move on to Hawaii, I mean, not Hawaii, but Maui, the Garden Island, which is known for good diving and snorkeling. The state triggerfish. And of course, Hawaii is known for its tropical plants, plumerias that they make the leis out of, bird of paradise, king proteas. These are huge, huge flowers. They originally came from South Africa, but they grow quite well on the upcountry slopes of Maui. Haliconia, another tropical plant. So when you're hiking around on kind of the wet sides of the island, you're hiking among all these tropical flowers. And one of the famous roads on Maui is the Hana Road out to the far eastern end of the island. It's a 50-mile road, and there's 54 one-lane bridges that just hug the coast. And every little bridge, one-lane bridge, there'd be a waterfall coming down. You finally get out to Hana, where you can kind of unwind, black sand beach. And my friend Chuck Thorne owns Kalalau Caverns, also known as Hana Cave Tours. And he's a diver. He's written the dive book on Maui. And it was nice. He'd catch lobster for us and let us stay at his house, because we had a mapping project to map his big cave, which is roughly about 2 miles long, which is the longest cave on Maui. Maui has a huge volcano. Some may have heard of it. It's called Haleakala. It gets up to 10,000 feet, occasionally gets a dusting of snow. But you can hike down into the crater floor called House of the Sun. These are silver-thorn plants that only grow at this high elevation at 10,000 feet. Close up of this plant. And the crater floor is just full of cinder cones. And we actually mapped a cave for the Park Service a few years ago called Long Cave, that's down on the crater floor. I'd love to get back there again, because you can see on Google Earth that there's more caves down there to explore. Big Beach, McKenna Beach on Maui. Now we move over to the Big Island, where all the activity has been going on for the last 10, 15 years, and there's no end in sight. There's more caves to be explored. Again, the Pahoehoe, ropey lava. This is Kilauea Iki, the smaller of the two craters. And nature finds its way, even just 3 or 4 years after a lava flow. You can see some ferns taking root. Kilauea Iki is the site back in the early 60s, the largest recorded lava fountain anywhere in the world. This lava fountain shot up 2,000 vertical feet. Eventually, that lava finds its way through lava tubes and hits the ocean. You can see a Pele offering down at the bottom of this image. Pele is the goddess of the lava. And you can hike out when the lava is flowing. And Kilauea was going for 30 plus years, and then it shut down a couple of years ago, but now it's going again. Did a flyover to Pu'u'o'o, the active lava lake at the time. And then a couple of years ago, I hiked out because it was flowing into the ocean. So a month after we hiked out, that whole cliff face came down, and now the Park Service has roped it off to be further away, so you can't get as close to the lava. but you can sure feel the heat. And of course, lava forms at least the new beaches to be black sand beaches. This is Hana Molino Bay, which is just on the southwest coast of the Big Island. Some of the locals sunning themselves is the sea turtles. But it also has nice white beaches too for diving and snorkeling. Peter Bosted going out at Papa Bay snorkeling. And it's a big, like a fishbowl, just snorkel among the tropical fish. Again, the green sea turtle. The Taka Falls, just outside of Hilo. There's a torch ginger there with a little gecko hanging on. Here he is getting the nectar off the Haliconia there. And here's a shot of the holiday entrance to Casimira, which is the world's longest and deepest lava tube at a little over 40 miles in length and something like 3,500 feet deep from the highest entrance to the lowest entrance. But again, you're never more than less than 100 feet under the surface because most lava tubes just kind of follow the slope of the volcano down. And this was formed in a 300 to 500-year-old flow. So again, very young cave geologically. Typical passage. But 25 years ago, it's been 25 years anyway, since we did the first through trip in Casimira after we connected the last section. So we did a through trip, and at the time, Alan Kressler was on that trip, and a couple other tag cavers that pretty much did all the rigging. We set up an underground camp the day before so we could just travel lightly. And the first day there were 16 rope drops down these lava falls, and you get these plunge pools at the bottom. They cool and then they crack and then they kind of settle down. But it took us 2 days to go from the highest entrance to the lowest entrance. So we traversed 27 miles underground. And by the time that trip was over, everybody's boots were pretty well eaten up. Carol Vesley was on the trip and Pat Cambyses. Some cavers may know these people that were on this trip also. But the good thing about Casimira being a younger cave, not as much breakdown. At least the through trip, 20 of it was like this smooth floor, which helped travel quickly. But there's still 7 miles of loose breakdown we had to cover to get the first historic trip anyway. And Black Sand Beach, Wapua Valley on the North Shore. Somebody set up some rock art on the nearby beach up there. And you never get tired of a Hawaiian sunset. And here's a night shot of Halemaumau, the inner crater to Kilauea, which has changed drastically since I've been over there, because it has sunken deeper in when they had that big lava flow 2 years ago. Anyway, that's the show anyway. Let me get out of stop sharing.
Well, I've heard of people using what is it? Some type of rubber mats that they have 2 mats with them to move along through some of that.
Yeah, that actually a black trash bag works real good. Peter Bosted is probably the most active caver over there, and we actually have another project, but that's for another slideshow. The last 10 years we've been working on a huge cave that it may end up passing Casimira and for being the longest and deepest. It's the Delicia system, named after a rare tree that was growing. They thought it was extinct, but it was found in the entrance, one of the entrances to the Delicia system, and started survey. They had a survey trip there back in about 04, 05, but it wasn't until Peter got on island and took over the project from Doug Medville, where he's been averaging for the last 5 years until COVID hit, he was adding 7 miles a year to the cave system. It's up to, let's see, not quite 30. The last I heard, it was like 29 and a half miles. That's all connected, but it is just 2 meters shy in depth of Casimira. It's exactly 1,100 meters. So I don't know what's that, about 3,600 feet of vertical from the highest entrance to the lowest entrance. But this one's another mazy one. And there's some phenomenal lava splatters in this cave, but there's nearly 500 entrances. So you're never more than, quarter mile from an entrance to get out. So you would go survey in the dark and would even go out for lunch because it'd be a nearby entrance, kind of like the caves down in there, Josh, in the Yucatan, where there's all these entrances you can chill out. So, but it's up on the volcano Hawaii, which is the big volcano above Kona. And it starts right near the source, up over 7,000 feet, and the lowest entrance is at about 2,000. So he makes a couple more connections. We could have a cave that's 5,000 vertical feet. And I gave a talk 2 years ago at the IVS, the International Vulcan Speleological Symposium, a paper on that. But that's for another time because that cave is still being mapped. And who knows when they'll finish, but hopefully in the next few years. He wanted me to do the atlas on that one. I helped on the Casimira atlas, which was like a 100-page atlas. This one's going to be at least 70 pages. And I've done a couple quad sheets, but luckily it says, hey, I can't do this by myself. This is too big of a project. So he's getting 3 or 4 other cartographers involved to try to help do some of the different sections of that cave. But that's probably the latest and greatest one going on right now on the Big Island.
Hey, Bob, I really appreciate you sharing this with us. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit about the difficulty surveying in a lava tube. With my experience at Craters of the Moon in Idaho, lava tubes are pretty hard to survey as far as the magnetics are concerned.
Yes, well, what we do is we do an elbow up. So you get it off that rock. You try to always survey in the middle because front and back sites are a must because sometimes you'll be surveying and you just can't get it. The needle is just, it goes crazy. There's definitely magnetic problems in surveying in lava tube. Besides, lava is really sharp rock. It's really like glass in a way, basalt. So, distos were a lifesaver. We broke so many survey tapes back in the 90s until disto came along. We're so happy. In fact, I think I had one of the first distos. I just did the laser and surveying with Doug Medville. He named the cave Disto Cave because we're so happy that we didn't keep breaking tape because it always get caught on the jagged rock. And then, of course, Disto X2 came along and that made our lives a lot easier. So I'm sure the next generation, they'll have these things. You just walk through the passage and it'll just map it for you. But I think you still need an artistic skill to get the sketches in, though, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've seen a lot of folks who are surveying on top of computer programs.
Right.
But those outputs aren't really, I guess, up to the standard, which I think cave maps are as far as hand drafted maps.
Right. Well, I think I told you earlier where, I've been entering the cartography salon since the 80s, and it wasn't until when was that? That was 96. I finally got the best to show. So I've been entering for 15 years. I'd be close several times, but and that was when I switched to computers, because my goal was to make my computer maps look as good as my hand drafted maps. But the beauty about computers is then you can start adding color. Back then it was pen and ink with Leroy sets, and so it's come a long ways in a short period. I've seen the whole gamut since my early career, because I was a draftsman, a geological draftsman for an oil company, and did it by hand in the beginning, and in the end, everything was on computers. So I had good tools and good access for plotting out and making maps. That's for sure.
Awesome. Well, this has been an excellent presentation. I really appreciate you coming out tonight and sharing this with the Nashville crowd.
Well, it's pretty easy with Zoom. I didn't even have Zoom on my computer until I called you up. I said, wait, send me a link. Because then Howard told me, he said, well, there'll be a way it'll tell you to download the software. And it was pretty painless.
It's pretty easy. And I think during these COVID times, it's definitely been something we can capitalize on. So is there any other questions for Bob this evening?
Yeah, I've got a question, Bob. First off, thank you. This presentation has been these photos and in your maps are pretty mind blowing. So thank you for that. So I guess the first question that I have a little selfishly is how can we see more of your maps and learn more about that? But my second question, which I've been curious about for some time, is does the Grotto in Hawaii, what is their relationship with the indigenous groups that live in Hawaii? And I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Well, maybe John's I know is on this. He's the chairman of the Hawaii Grotto. He might be able to say something about it.
Okay, I can give you a little bit of information. The exploration drive or culture of Native Hawaiians seem to be in a decreasing mode. If you will go back, and we see signs of Native Hawaiians in the caves all the time, and one has to be impressed with their caving ability, considering that they were using little hand torches and whatever. But there seemed to be very little interest in the Native community now in exploration of basically of any type of caves or astronomy or whatever. So we have tried to recruit Native Hawaiians and with not much success. So almost all of our members in the Grotto are from the mainland, the vast majority, and a few people that were born here but are Halis in the traditional sense. However, for those of you who would like to come to Hawaii, we do have accommodations, and we put people up all the time in our house who and take people caving on the Big Island or the island of Hawaii. So we don't do as much of the exotic stuff that Bob has shown you in this slideshow. We don't go to any of the other islands, and rarely do us old guys go up anywhere near 14,000 feet. Finding that as we've gotten older, that's just really hard. But anyway, we can offer you some really neat caving here if you get to the island, and we can try to make it somewhat economical by providing a place to stay and so forth. And I'm sort of disappointed that we don't have more Native Hawaiians involved, but there just aren't very many. And we had one guy, and but he got very mad at some other people and generalized to the whole grotto, where he was really only mad at one or two cavers, but but he's no longer active. We thought we'd done pretty well to get one guy, but we don't have any right now that are involved in our activities.
Well, I have to say that that John actually has a cave entrance right by his house. He literally, you can just walk right down and get into one of the good caves on the south end of the island. So it's a whole caving community that lives down near John that have relocated down. In fact, that's why they formed the Grotto, what, about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, we reactivated the Hawaii Grotto is actually about 20 years old, but it had fallen into inactivity some years due to, well, we won't go into those problems. But anyway, we can go caving all the time. Sometimes we, on the spur of the moment, we can just go down and see a really neat cave 2 miles away. Or if I want to, I can just walk out the front door and within a minute, I can be in a cave that has an entrance of 40 feet by 30 feet. So the caves are just all over the place here. We've got several, just to show you, we've got so many caves that we can't even get people to do cave digs. We know where there's some more really neat caves, but it's going to require a dig. And people will look at me like, why do we want to dig? We could just walk into all these other caves. So we have just so many caves to go into. And I suspect it's getting even more so. Right now, my last calculation was more than half of the significant lava caves in the world are on this island. But as we find more and more, I think it's going to turn out to be something like 75% of the significant lava caves in the world are on this island. And we just keep hearing about them. And some of them, right now, I can't even get all the people that are mapping some of these things to publicize it. They're keeping stuff secret for some strange reason. But they're just amazing. They're all over the place. So if you want to come and enjoy caving, this is really, it's just hard to beat this island for caving.
It truly is the Everest of lava caving anywhere in the world. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, back in 2013, John opened up his home to myself, and I did 2 Hawaii trips, 2013 and 2014. And so I definitely appreciate cavers who open their homes in such exotic places. And so it's definitely a beautiful place. I was able to cave with Peter for a day. I love lava tubes. I have a super interest in Mars and the caving that could be had on Mars and how it can be compared to caving in Hawaii because of all the lava which are found in both of the areas. And so yeah, this is a special place for me, and it's great to have these guys, Bob and John, join us tonight, who are definitely intermixed with this scene. And so I appreciate both of you guys for not only presenting tonight, Bob, but also John sharing, and also just being such a steward of caving. John is originally, I believe, from Virginia and moved to Hawaii a few years ago and has been kind of set up as a base for cavers to visit. And he opened up his house for me and is very opening to all cavers. So thank you guys for that.
It's that aloha spirit.
That's right. Thank you.
I just wanted to add something here too, and I did type it on the chat box, but for those that didn't see it, I am the secretary for the Hawaii Grotto, and the only criteria for membership is NSS membership. There's no separate grotto dues. If any of you would like to join, just shoot me an email at kfdrck@gmail.com and we can get y'all hooked up as a member. Also, we're on Facebook, Hawaii Grotto.
Sweet. Hey, Bob, can you stop sharing so we can get to our group?
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me hit the stop button. There we go.
Does anybody else have any questions for Bob or John as far as Hawaii caving? All right. Well, it sounds like we're wrapping up this evening. And like again, thank you guys for sharing such a special place um, in the world. Next month, as far as our members meeting, I'll have Crash Kennedy, Jim Kennedy, who will be presenting on some Mexico caving.